In spring 1203, the Fourth Crusade hung by a thread. Having left Venice in October the previous year, the ragtag army of French, Flemish, Burgundians, and others had already sacked the Christian city of Zara, trying to raise funds to pay for their Venetian fleet. It seemed they were too poor to pay their passage to the Holy Land and recapture Jerusalem from the Saracens. At the head of the crusade were three extraordinary men: Enrico Dandolo, Doge of Venice, in his 90s and blind, but nevertheless one of the most formidable leaders of the age; Boniface of Montferrat, an experienced soldier who had been chosen as the new leader of the crusade. It was his chance to reassert his dynasty's reputation after defeats in his homeland; and Baldwin IX, Count of Flanders and Hainault, an ambitious young man who had had several violent quarrels with the crowned heads of Europe and was eager to prove his mettle. As the crusade floundered in debt and confusion, the course of history was to be changed by a chance encounter with an exiled prince. Alexios IV Angelos offered the Crusaders enough money to pay for their whole expedition. All he wanted in exchange was for his father's lost throne, stolen by his uncle Alexios III, who now sat in the palace of Constantinople. Alexios IV's father, Isaac II, had been blinded and imprisoned beneath the palace, forgotten for 8 years. The Crusaders, having heard legends of the fantastical wealth of the fabled Byzantine Empire, eagerly snapped up Alexios IV's offer. They set sail for the east, for Constantinople, to put an emperor back on the throne. Constantinople, one of the greatest cities in Christendom, a cultural melting pot that sat on the crossroads between East and West, commanding an empire that stretched from Greece to the Holy Land, protected by mighty Roman walls that had never yet fallen to an enemy, and an army of professional soldiers and the elite Varangian Guard, the city seemed impregnable. At its centre was the great Church of Holy Wisdom, the beating heart of Orthodox Christianity and seat of His Holiness the Patriarch of the East. It is the 23rd of June 1203, and the Fourth Crusade has arrived at Constantinople, taking the Emperor and indeed the entire city by surprise. Having sailed their fleet into the Golden Horn, the Crusaders disembark and seize the suburb of Galata just across the bay from Constantinople, establishing a foothold on the throat of the Byzantine Empire. On the 18th of July, the Crusaders launch an attack on the city walls. The Emperor Alexios III leads an army out to face the invaders in open ground. Though his army appears to be a match for the Crusaders, the Emperor's courage fails him and he orders a retreat. The defenders withdraw to the city. With the city under constant attack, the Byzantines are distraught and demoralized. They look to their emperor for leadership. Alexios III, however, thinks only of himself. The emperor empties his own treasury and abandons his people, his city, and his empire. Stowing Byzantium's wealth in a fishing boat, the emperor slips away unnoticed to Anatolia, never to return. With the empire leaderless and the city under siege, officials within the palace release the former emperor Isaac II to fill the power vacuum. The old emperor is back on the throne, but the Crusaders demand that their own protege be crowned co-emperor. On the 1st of August, Alexios IV enters the city and takes his seat beside his father. Though Alexios has finally achieved his dream of becoming emperor, he is painfully aware of the Crusader army that still lies encamped around the walls of Constantinople, expecting him to keep his promise of financial reimbursement. But there is a problem. With the imperial treasury bled dry by his predecessor, Alexios is a desperate man. He orders that the city's monasteries and churches are to be stripped of their gold and silver. Nothing is safe, not even the precious holy icons that are an integral part of Byzantine religious belief. Yet even the riches of the Orthodox Church are not enough for Alexios to fully repay his debt. He manages to raise only 100,000 silver marks, half of what he had originally promised to the Crusaders. Though Alexios negotiates a 6-month extension for the fulfillment of his promise, it is a decision for which he will pay with his life. In January 1204, Alexios' father, Isaac, dies of natural causes, leaving the young emperor with few allies. By this stage, Alexios is also unpopular with many of his citizens, provoking unrest on the streets of Constantinople. A nobleman by the name of Alexios Mourtzouphlos, leader of the anti-Crusader faction in the court, seizes the opportunity to stage a coup. In early February, Mourtzouphlos has Alexios IV murdered, and has himself crowned Alexios V. Incensed by the death of Alexios IV, the Crusaders demand that his usurper hands over the remaining money they are owed, but the new emperor refuses. On the 8th of April 1204, the Crusader army launches a new assault on Constantinople. Despite initial resistance from the forces of Mourtzouphlos, the Byzantine army is soon overwhelmed and Mourtzouphlos flees. It is the 13th of April 1204, and the Crusaders have breached the walls of Constantinople. In an orgy of violence that lasts 3 days, the Crusaders kill countless civilians and clerics, defile nuns, loot churches and monasteries, and destroy or steal irreplaceable Byzantine artwork, manuscripts, and sculptures. To symbolize their control of the city, and indeed the entire Byzantine Empire, the Crusaders elect Baldwin IX, Count of Flanders, as the first Latin emperor of Constantinople. The Crusaders finally have all of the riches promised to them by Alexios IV. But for Constantinople, Queen of Cities, the events of the Fourth Crusade are like a slow-acting venom which will eventually lead to her decline and the disintegration of the entire Byzantine Empire.